The old man stood at center stage and looked at Simon Cowell and said, very quietly, "You kept me safe." Simon Cowell couldn't speak. He didn't move. He sat completely still, both hands on the table, eyes on the old man's face. The entire auditorium held its breath with him. Another Tuesday night taping. The Pasadena Civic Auditorium packed with 3,000 people. Cameras rolling, millions watching from home. Another hopeful contestant stepping into the spotlight. Howie Mandel had one leg crossed over the other, relaxed, expectant. Heidi Klum was leaning back in her chair with her arms folded and a small, curious smile already forming. Sofia Vergara was turned slightly sideways, saying something to the producer at the edge of the stage. Simon Cowell sat at the center, black shirt, arms crossed. That familiar expression of measured skepticism, worn so long it had ceased to be an expression and had become, instead, a kind of architecture. Just another contestant. Just another Tuesday. The man who walked out was 73 years old, broad-shouldered, white-haired, moving with the slight deliberateness of a man who has learned not to hurry and doesn't see any reason to start. He wore a plain dark suit, a white shirt, no tie. His hands were large. He held them loosely at his sides, and there was nothing in them. No prop, no envelope, no folder, nothing but himself. He walked to the center of the stage and stopped. He looked out at 3,000 people with the calm of someone who has faced larger things than an audience. Terry Crews came out grinning. "Sir, I already respect you just from the walk. Tell me your name." The old man smiled. A slow, unhurried smile. "Arthur," he said. "Arthur Devlin. Arthur Devlin. How old are you, Arthur?" 73. The auditorium responded warmly, the full, generous sound of 3,000 people who decide in an instant that they're rooting for someone. Arthur waited for it to quiet. "And what are you going to do for us tonight?" Terry asked. "Sing," Arthur said. "Just that." Nothing added. Terry nodded, sensing something. He always did. "Arthur, who are you singing for tonight?" Arthur Devlin looked past Terry, past the audience. He looked at the judges' table, at Simon Cowell. Directly, without embarrassment or apology, the way a man looks at someone he has thought about for a very long time. "I'm singing for the man who kept me safe," Arthur said, "when my father was gone and there was nobody else." The room went quiet. The particular quiet that isn't silence, but something close to it. 3,000 people pulling in the same breath. Sofia Vergara had turned all the way forward. Howie Mandel uncrossed his legs and sat up. Heidi Klum's smile had changed into something still, attentive, tuned. Terry kept his voice low. "Can you tell us who that was, Arthur?" Arthur looked at Simon Cowell for a long moment. Then he said it. "You kept me safe," he said. "It was you, and I've waited 50 years to say it." Simon Cowell couldn't speak. He didn't move. He sat completely still, both hands on the table, eyes on Arthur Devlin's face, and the entire auditorium held its breath with him. Howie Mandel had both hands pressed flat to his cheeks. Heidi Klum's hand had gone to her mouth. Sofia Vergara was leaning forward with her elbows on the table. Watching Simon, the focused attention of someone watching a moment that will not come again. Simon stood. Slowly, he stepped around the judges' table. In 15 seasons, he had never once crossed onto the stage floor before a contestant had performed. He did it now. He walked to where Arthur Devlin was standing. 73 years old. Broad-shouldered, large hands loose at his sides, Simon stood in front of him and looked at his face. 50 years, Simon said. Quietly, 50 years, Arthur said. "I don't," Simon stopped. He started again. "Tell me your name, your full name, from before." "Devlin," Arthur said. "But before that, Neville, Arthur Neville. I was Arthur Neville." Something crossed Simon Cowell's face. Recognition, the particular kind that arrives not as a fact but as a feeling, a room, a time of day, a specific kind of cold. "The letters," Simon said. "Every month," Arthur said. "For 6 years. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 53 years earlier. In 1972, Simon Cowell was 13 years old and living in a suburb of London. Not yet famous, not yet anything in particular. A boy who paid attention to music more than his schoolwork. He had opinions already, strong ones. He lived with his parents in a comfortable house on a tree-lined street. In that same year, 60 miles north in Luton, a boy named Arthur Neville was 10 years old. And not comfortable at all. Arthur's father, Raymond, had died the previous winter. A workplace accident. He was 34. Arthur was 9 when it happened, and his sister, Patricia, was 7. Their mother, Vera, was 31 and had no training for any work that paid enough, and 2 children who needed things. They moved into a 2-room flat above a chip shop. The road smelled of fryer oil in the mornings. Cold grease at night. Vera took 2 jobs, rarely home before 8. Arthur learned to make toast. He made it every night for Patricia. Buttered it. Cut it into triangles. He was 10 years old. He was also falling through school. Not dramatically. No outbursts, no confrontations. He simply stopped being reachable. His teachers wrote in his reports, capable, but disengaged. Potential not being realized, the language of institutions for a child who has gone somewhere inside himself and can't quite find the way back. A teacher, a music teacher named Mr. Hedges, put a record on during a free period one afternoon. He did not explain it. He just played it. A program that had been broadcast on BBC Radio 1. A special segment on music and emotion, produced by a small company whose name Arthur barely caught. He listened for the full 40 minutes. Something in the way the presenter talked about music reached past the place inside Arthur where he had gone. Plainly, directly, without condescension. As if the listener were intelligent and the subject were serious. He wrote a letter that night. Not to the BBC, to the production company. He had found an address on the back of a guide his mother had kept. He said, "I am 10 years old, and my father died last year, and I don't know what I am meant to do next. I listened to your program about music, and I think it is the only thing that has made sense to me since he died. I am not asking for anything. I just wanted someone to know." He signed it, Arthur Neville, Luton. He expected nothing. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at the flat above the chip shop. It was addressed to Arthur Neville, in the handwriting of a 13-year-old boy. Simon Cowell had found the letter in his father's office. His father worked for the production company. It was a Saturday morning. Simon had come in with him and been left to sit quietly. He had read the letter while his father was on a call. Twice he had taken a piece of the company notepaper from the supply in the bottom drawer, sat down at his father's desk, and written back. He said, "I am 13, and I don't know much about anything yet. But I know what you mean about music. I think it does the same thing for me. I am sorry about your father. I don't know what else to say about that. But I think you should keep writing to me if you want. I will write back." He signed it, Simon. He did not tell his father what he had done. He posted the letter himself on the way home. Arthur wrote back. Simon wrote back. Every month, for 6 years, a letter went each way. From a flat above a chip shop in Luton to a house on a tree-lined street in London, and back again. Arthur wrote about music, about school, about Patricia, about his mother's jobs, about what it was like to want something and not know what it was. Simon wrote back about music, about school, about the industry his father worked in, about the things he was beginning to understand, how sound worked, why some things moved people, why others didn't. They never met. They exchanged no photographs. Arthur knew Simon's last name by the end of the second year, but never used it. Simon had no idea the boy from Luton had kept every single letter in a shoebox under his bed. The letters stopped in 1978. Arthur was 16, and Simon was 19. It was not an argument. It was simply what happens. Lives pulled in different directions. Addresses changed. The thread too thin to survive the distance. Arthur lost the address. He kept the shoebox. Through 3 flats, 2 houses, a marriage, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. 50 years of a life that had, in the end, come out right. Music had been the thread throughout. He joined a choir at 17, sang at his church for 40 years, taught his grandchildren to sing after dinner. Mr. Hedges had written him a reference for a community college course. That led to an apprenticeship, then a trade, then a working life his mother had not been sure was possible. The thread, as he understood it, began with a 13-year-old boy who had written back when he didn't have to. He had recognized Simon Cowell the first time he appeared on television, sat in his armchair and said, very quietly, to Maureen, "I know him." She had not understood. He had not explained. He had watched Simon's career unfold over 20 years with the specific attention of someone who has private knowledge of a person's early goodness. He told Maureen the full story on their 35th anniversary. She cried. Then she said, "You should tell him." He said, "One day." One day had taken 15 more years. Until Maureen died. Until his granddaughter heard him humming and said, "Grandad, you should be on that show." He thought that was the end of the story. Until tonight. On the stage of the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, Simon Cowell stood in front of Arthur Devlin, the boy from Luton, the man from the shoebox, the voice from the other end of 6 years of letters. His face had moved into something that had no name in the language of television. Not performance. Not emotion managed for cameras. Just a man standing in the place where something he had forgotten existed turned out to have mattered enormously. He had been 13. He had used his father's notepaper. He had posted the letter on the way home and not told anyone. He had not thought about it since. He had thought about it since. Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. He produced a single folded sheet of paper, yellowed, soft at the creases from being opened, and refolded many hundreds of times. He held it out. Simon took it. He unfolded it. He looked at the handwriting. His own, 13 years old. 1972. He could not speak for a moment. He looked at Arthur. "You kept all of them?" he said. "Every one," Arthur said. "Shoebox under the bed. Still there. Share this if it stayed with you. Subscribe so you never miss a moment like this one." Sofa Vergara was crying quietly. She was not trying to stop. Heidi Klum had both hands pressed together in front of her mouth. Howie Mandel stood up from his chair, stood all the way up and stayed standing. His eyes were bright. His expression was the one people get when they have just watched something they will carry for a long time. Simon Cowell folded the letter carefully. He handed it back to Arthur Devlin with both hands. Arthur took it the same way. They stood like that for a moment. 2 men, 60 years between them. A piece of paper being returned to the person it had always belonged to. Simon put his hand on Arthur's shoulder. He said one thing. "Thank you for finding me." Arthur nodded. "Thank you," he said, "for writing back." Simon walked back to the judge's table. He sat down. He made no effort to compose himself, and none was expected. Arthur Devlin turned to face the auditorium. 73 years old, large hands at his sides, 40 years of singing in his chest. He drew one slow breath. He sang. The song was one he had sung at his church in Luton for 38 years. An old English folk song. Unaccompanied, about a river and a long journey home and the things a person carries that never get lighter but do, eventually, become familiar. His voice was a bass, deep and steady, and worn in the particular way that voices get worn when they have been used honestly for a long time. He sang it without ornamentation, without theater. He sang it the way he had always sung, as if the point was the song, not the singer. When the last note finished, the silence was absolute. 7 full seconds. Then 3,000 people stood, all of them, simultaneously, the way people stand when they have no choice. The sound was enormous and human, not applause so much as acknowledgement. A room agreeing about something true. Heidi Klum stood with tears on her face and both hands raised. Sofia Vergara was on her feet, openly crying, not trying to stop it. Howie Mandel stood with his chin up and his eyes closed, and something that looked close to gratitude on his face. Simon Cowell reached forward. No pause, no deliberation. He pressed the golden buzzer without a word. Gold confetti fell over Arthur Devlin. He stood with his hands at his sides and his face turned up. A smile that had 60 years of something in it. Relief, perhaps, or completion. The expression of a person who has said the thing they came to say and found that the saying of it was enough. In the months that followed, the shoebox was donated to a small archive for early British broadcasting correspondence. Both sides of the letters were preserved and catalogued. Arthur had kept Simon's. Simon, it turned out, had kept 3 of Arthur's in a box his mother had maintained. They were not published. Arthur felt that was right. Simon agreed. Some things are witnesses, not exhibits. Some kindness is done in 13 minutes, with borrowed notepaper. Some of it lasts a lifetime.